I don't know whether it affects the night sky where I am, but anyway, I will take more note of that.
But if you think if a person does one thing, if every person could get rid of one light, reduce the usage of one light, could you imagine in a town like Melbourne, what have you got? A couple of million people?
Oh, more than that.
But there are places in the world like Beijing and London, Paris, New
You would
York,
never really get to see the night sky.
Tokyo, Korea, Seoul, Korea. Think of those, and all the bigger cities around the world. They can't see any lights.
Faye and
Panic, I know. This time,
today my news you need to have along the way. Hello, I'm Faye Waterman, and this is Conversations with Faye. And in this episode, I'm having a conversation with Donna Burton, who's more affectionately known as Donna the Astronomer. And today, what we're going to be talking about in this episode is light pollution, saving the dark sky one light at a time. Donna will be talking about how we as individuals can preserve the night sky by turning off the lights that we don't use, closing the curtains at night when we have our lights on, so the night sky can be seen in all its beauty. So let's welcome and see what Donna has to say.
welcome. I'm Faye Waterman. This is A Conversation with Faye. My guest today is Donna Burton, who is more affectionately known as Donna the Astronomer. Today we're going to be talking about light pollution. Welcome, Donna.
Well, thank you, Faye.
Now, Donna, you are an astronomer. How long have you been an astronomer for?
Do I have to answer?
Yes.
Since last century.
Since last century. Okay. All right. Now, Donna, you are a wealth of knowledge as far as astronomy goes, but the topic I want to talk about today is light pollution and how it affects our night skies, particularly in the city areas. So, what is light pollution? What does it mean to start with?
So light pollution is a very, very insidious type of pollution and environmental impact. And it's basically where you just have all these extraneous lights that point up into the sky and basically mean that you can't see the night sky the way it should be. It basically impacts upon lots of other things, not just the night sky and astronomy, but impacts upon people's health and animals and turtles and birds and all sorts of different things in life are affected by the increase in light pollution. And unfortunately, cities are the prime offenders, but then even football ovals, anything where you've got all these bright lights. So wherever light goes up, it's affecting our atmosphere and what we can see. Whereas light that goes down is acceptable and is good. Cut off lighting so it comes down is what you want because then it's lighting up the area where you are. It's also more energy efficient. I mean, in this time of cost of living, it's also something to be considered.
There's nothing worse than when you're walking somewhere and it's quite dark, and then all of a sudden this spotlight comes on and it shines right out into the distance and almost blinds you. What could they do to have that security there with the security lights? How could they make them better for light pollution?
So they don't need to be as bright as they are because, as you said, they blind you, which is actually bad for security because you can't see what's going on in the shadows because your lights already affected you. But also, like I said, light going downwards, lights that's always angled down, but not on white surfaces because then you look around a lot of city areas, you've got shiny footpaths and surfaces, so the light then hits that and then reflects right back up at you. And sort of kind of defeats the purpose of it all. But it's using lights that are more warmer and softer and not so super bright. We talk about LEDs being so good for the environment because they're more energy efficient. But from an astronomer's point of view, they're actually worse. And if you think about cars with bright LEDs when you're driving, they really, really blind you, even when they're not on high beam.
Yes,
And
they do actually.
So if you think about that, and they're also in a part of the spectrum which we as astronomers, so we look at light as a spectrum like the rainbow. And so the things that are further away and are dimmer for us are often at the blue end of the spectrum, which is where most LEDs, the light is blue-white light, which affects that part. So it's stopping us from seeing a lot of stuff that we could have seen, which is also the reason why you don't build observatories in the middle of the city.
Yeah.
These days you build them in the country and on hills and mountains and places.
What could we do to improve in the cities our light pollution? Because it is, you drive around and you see buildings with lights on weekends
24/7.
and nights which don't need to be on, so they could be turned off.
And you'd think that people would do that anyway, just from a purely cost point of view. But I'm sure you know that I've got this ebook I've just written called Saving the Night Sky One Light at a Time. It looks at the full gamut, not just from an astronomer's point of view, but a full gamut of the effects of light pollution. And it literally is one light at a time. Why do you need a security light that's on all the way out there to tell the burglar that you're out? You know what I mean? You leave your security lights on when you go out, and you might be able 3 or 4 hours. Do you really need that?
No, a lot of security lights now these days have cameras in them, and they turn on when someone comes close to them, which is much better than having them on all the time. How much does it affect? What pollution or level of pollution is it for the night sky? I know in the cities, when you look up at the sky, you don't get the effects of the true night sky as you do when you're in the country with no city lights around.
Yeah, so I'm obviously very spoiled because I live in Coonabarabran, which is a night's, we have protection of the night sky, then we have the dark sky park. But I put to you the big telescope in Exciting Spring, where I've worked. You can stand on the catwalk of that and you can see the lights of Newcastle and Sydney.
Really? And how far away are you?
400 k's of the crow flies.
Really?
From Sydney.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So you can actually see their lights. You can see from the mining, which are 24-hour mines you've got in the area, particularly Newcastle.
Right, yes.
Because you've got a lot of mining and everything there, and the different mining areas. And even in towns like Parkes, which is a 3-hour drive away,
yes,
we can see the North Parkes mine.
Wow.
Because they have lights on all the time, so they're 24-hour operation.
Now, is that by the naked eye or is that through?
That's taking a picture with my
naked eye.
Yeah, you can see the glow. Yeah.
Wow.
And you take a photo of it, and it's so obvious. You can identify the towns by the lights.
Wow. Wow, I didn't realise that. What could we do here in a city, the city of Melbourne? What could we do to improve our lightscape so that we could have a better view of the night skies and the beautiful night sky?
So not have lights that are pointing upwards. So if you think about a lot of places, I don't know about Melbourne that well, but certainly in Sydney around the foreshores, they've got these great big lights that are just there and they go up, they don't go down.
Where you need it.
Yeah, so you have the lights and you can just put what we call full cut off over top or half cut off. So the light's not going up into the sky, it's going down on the ground where you need it for security so you can see where you're going.
And the lights are waste going up anyway. It needs to
not
be
doing
down
anything.
because that's where we need to see.
And use softer light because, as you know, the brighter the light, the harder it is to see and the more darker the shadows are.
That's right.
And we all know what bad things live in shadows. I watch too many scary movies. I don't want to know what's in the shadows. It's scary. That's why you want the light to be diffusing the shadows.
Yeah. What else can we do about light? To make people in their homes aware of
close the curtains.
Close the curtains at night instead of leaving the curtains open and lights on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Just have darker curtains. You don't have to have really ugly dark curtains. They're making really nice block-out curtains these days. And also, if you think about when you've got lights, people can see in, and it's a security risk anyway.
Yeah.
So by having your curtains shut or having blinds and that, you're stopping light overflow.
Yeah. And what else? What else can we do? Because I'm sure there's
just
a lot.
One light at a time. Just look at what lights you have and what lights do you actually need. And Christmas is a different time, so we all have our pretty lights at Christmas. Yeah. But if you look around some places these days, people have lights, decorative lights outside on, solar lights, 24/7 just about, even outside of Christmas.
I have lights on outside at night. Yes, I'll have to think about that one.
But you asked what sort of things are.
Yeah, yeah.
And again, a lot of those solar lights are quite bright.
Well, mine are just little decorative Christmas lights, and they just are on a timer. They come on at a certain time and they turn off at a certain time. But it is in that prime time. I don't know whether it affects the night sky where I am, but anyway, I will take more note of that.
But if you think if every person does one thing, if every person could get rid of one light, reduce the usage of one light, could you imagine in a town like Melbourne, what have you got? A couple million people?
Oh, more than that.
But if you just imagine that each family turned off one light or reduced their lighting, how much effect that would actually have. Now, we're so lucky in Australia that we can still see the night sky. You know that. You walk along there and you know you can see the stars. And even in Sydney, I've been at the Easter show in Sydney, which is really brightly lit. But I can still see the Southern Cross or Orion at that time of year. Not as good as I can see it at home, obviously. But there are places in the world like Beijing and London, Paris,
You
New
would
York,
never really get to see the night sky.
Tokyo, Korea, Seoul, Korea. Think of those, and all the bigger cities around the world. They can't see any lights. I don't know if I've told you about the young fellow from China.
Tell us that story.
So he came to one of my night shows and he said to me, and he was a young fellow, about 24, 25, a uni graduate from Beijing. And he said to me, how come you can see the moon in the daytime in Australia? Is that a Southern Hemisphere thing? And of course, I thought he was taking the mickey out of me. But he was deathly serious because the smog and everything in Beijing during the day and the high buildings, you don't see the sky. And of course, at night, you can't see the sky because of all the pollution, the light pollution.
So they're missing out, aren't they?
And there are children in the world who have never seen the night sky. We're still lucky in Australia. We've got it. We've got to do everything we can to protect it because otherwise your great-grandkids and your great-grandkids will grow up and not see the stars.
It's quite interesting, isn't it, that you take it for granted. I think we as humans take the night sky for granted. It's there, so we just expect it to be there. But a lot of the time we don't walk around looking up. We walk around looking either in front of us or down.
Or talking on our devices.
Oh, yes, yes.
Contributing to light pollution with our devices everywhere.
When you think about it, it's really interesting, isn't it? So things that we can do as individual homeowners is at night when we turn our lights on is close the curtains to block out the light from leaking outside.
Look at your security lights and make sure they're pointing downwards, not upwards.
Yeah. So,
and they're on timers.
And they're on timers. So if someone comes, then you can...
So they're activated.
Yes. Yes.
But when little puppy dogs run in front of them, they don't set off.
Little puppy dogs. Yes. And what else? What other things do we need to think about?
Think about the type of lights that we're using.
Yeah. Well,
but also talking to your councils about the lighting in street lighting.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of councils have moved to bright LED lights because they're cheaper to have.
Are they cheaper?
Maybe not the upfront cost, but the ongoing maintenance is.
Yeah.
From the old sodium and the old lights where you have to change bulbs and stuff.
Yeah.
But about how they reflect down and reflect up around pools and things like that. I mean, if people have got pools, they often have lights on them, but the surfaces of the pools are really bright. So again, you're getting reflection upwards.
Yeah. A pool looks really nice with lights in it at night, though, doesn't it?
It does.
You don't really stop to think about the pollution of the light and the night sky.
That's why it's a very insidious type of. It has a very insidious pollution.
Right.
Like you wouldn't throw your rubbish on the street.
Oh, some people would.
Well, you wouldn't. I wouldn't. No. And we wouldn't do that. But we don't actually think so much about it. I mean, I live in a place where we have government policy in place that prevent right up to 200 kilometres from the observatory to protect the observatory. And so people have to, I live 3 k's from the observatory, so I'm under the strictest rules. We can have no outdoor lights.
Right, at all.
at all.
So what if you need to go out and deal with the animals?
Well, we break the rules for that.
You break the rules.
We'll go, but we also, our lights are such that, you know, we
They
put them
face
under.
down?
Yeah, they face down and everything else because we're into astronomy and we live there and we know the rules. But yeah, obviously, if you've got to get the vet out, you've got to have some bright lights.
Yeah.
But you can still do it. And if you think about it, if you're looking after an animal, you want the animal undercover anyway, so
Yes.
your lights are undercover.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yes, I have been known to break the rules when I'm all of that.
What about the observatory? You know, you're at the observatory. What is the observatory?
So it's so I work at I've been kind of related with Siding Spring Observatory up at Siding Spring for many,
Start that
many
bit
years.
again.
So I've been involved with the Siding Spring Observatory, which has got multiple telescopes. But the Anglo-Australian telescope is the largest telescope in Australia, the optical telescope. It's very different from the dish. It's a different type of telescope.
Explain
It's
that
an
a little bit.
optical telescope, whereas the dish is a radio telescope.
Okay.
And so in the radio, their pollution is more electronic devices like microwaves and mobile phones and all that electronic noise
Right.
that we get. And that's the problem for those. But for us, it's light.
Right. So the light affects
What we can see and how far we can see and what research and what science we can do.
Mm.
Now, in Australia, we'll not build any bigger optical telescopes because we don't really have the high enough mountains to do it.
Right.
That's why the biggest telescopes in the world are in like Canary Islands in Chile and Hawaii.
Right.
Because they're above the atmosphere. Of course, the best telescopes, of course, are in space like James Webb and Hubble.
Right.
Because they're outside of our atmosphere and away from all the lights. But so we've got a 200K lighting environmental policy and plan, which is run by the New South Wales government. And this happens around observatories and other places as well. And it reduces the amount of lights people can have and the brightness of the lights. So you can have 4 25 lumen lights, or you can have one 100 lumen light. You're better off with your 4 because that covers a bigger area than having really big bright lights. And that's the other thing you can do is reduce the brightness of your lights. You don't need super big bright lights.
Okay. So there's a lot of things to really think about there. It's like I don't like a lot of light at night anyway. I don't have a lot of lights on. I don't like a lot of light. But there are a lot of people that just turn the lights on and don't even consider or think about the amount of light that's being used, the amount of power that's being used.
Yeah, with the cost of living crisis at the moment, it's one way you can actually save some money in your bottom line is by doing things like that, thinking about your lighting. I mean, if you think about when you were kids, you wouldn't. My grandparents were always on top of you. If you left a light on in a room you weren't using.
Yeah. Yeah, whereas we have this terrible habit of walking out of one room into another room and never turning the light off.
Exactly, because that's how we sort of got ourselves into our metal way of thinking. But it's also one of the things that we find, we have night shows, as you know. I do night sky shows where we show people the sky. And we're fully solar, so we don't have a lot of lighting anyway.
So you're full of solar.
We're fully solar powered.
Right.
Okay. And so we have the lights on at first for safety when people park their cars and come around. And then we explain what we're doing and whether, all the normal stuff one has to explain and how the telescopes work. And then we turn the lights off. I've had children scream, little 3, 4-year-olds, because they've never been in darkness before. And that's the other thing is that children in the cities aren't used to the dark. And that affects all the circadian rhythms and lends itself to all sorts of behavioural issues and that. I mean, there's a study that's still in the peer review status that's been looking at children in rural and regional areas right across the world where there aren't lights and kids in cities and the prevalence of various ADHD and all those sort of behavioural diseases are so much higher in the cities where there's almost 24-hour light. I mean, think about children in night lights. Why?
I don't know really.
But so many parents put night lights in because they themselves aren't comfortable because they were brought up in that light.
But you don't really think about it, do you? Until we have a conversation like this to think about the light pollution and how we could downgrade everything that we do by just thinking smarter. Turn the light off that you've walked out of the room in.
When you're replacing a light, replace it with something less with less lumens, less brightness.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? We've had conversations about this before, and it's really interesting to come back and have another conversation about it and talk about how we, as consumers of power and all the light that we actually use, half of it's unnecessary.
It is. But if you think about it, we sort of talk about the stars and everything else, and people think, oh, what, you know. But think about your bills, but also think about the health and everything else. But it affects plants. It affects insects. It affects the whole cycle of life.
Okay, talk a little bit more about that.
So, well, think about insects and light. What are they attracted to?
Light.
Bright lights, your moths and all your other critters.
Yeah.
They come around there, and it disturbs them all. So when you're looking at plants and they're supposed to be pollinating and doing all these other things that they're doing, and they're dying in our lights, and so the birds and everything that, you know how life is all interrelated.
Yeah.
And you have your whole cycle and everything gets messed up. I mean, we all know about turtles on beaches and lights and penguins. And I've just been to Phillip Island and to Kangaroo Island where they have the little fairy penguins. And the effect the light has on them and their breeding cycles and how they get lost.
Because, they sleep, and when they sleep in burrows. So it's in complete dark where they sleep. And then they come out on dusk. Well, at Phillip Island, they come out on dusk for
and
their
they're
parade.
attracted to come in,
Yeah.
Well, they actually don't come for the parade.
I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did with Donna the Astronomer. She has a wealth of knowledge, and talking about one light at a time to save the night sky. We don't think about it when we're walking around in our day-to-day life or our nightly lives about how the lights affect our night sky, and we don't get to see what is actually in the sky at night. So let's all come together and do our part. When you've got your lights on at night, instead of leaving your curtains open, close them. Turn off the lights that you don't use in your house. With the outside lights, if you have to have them on, point them down instead of having them pointed up into the sky itself. And those people that have those lights that shine bright up into the night sky, just turn them down a little bit so that it doesn't shine up and destroy the beauty of the night sky. Donna will be back with some more information about the pollution in the atmosphere, which is a fascinating thing to talk about. A couple of other things that she will be talking about as well. But thank you for listening. If you want to get in touch with Donna, you can get in touch with her on her website, Donna the Astronomer, or you can Google her and you'll find her anywhere. So it's bye from me for now, and I'll be back with another episode next week. Hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Instagram. Stay inspired, stay connected, and join our amazing community today.